Hello and welcome to Byju's Exam Prep IAS. Let's get started and look into our daily quiz. Let's look into the first question. With respect to financial powers of the governor, which of the following statements are correct? Money bills can be introduced in the state legislature only with his prior recommendation. He can make advances out of the consolidated fund of the state. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is one only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the governor. Why is the second option wrong? That is because he can make advances out of the contingency fund of the state and not from the consolidated fund of the state. Which are the financial powers that are accorded to the governor? He sees that the annual financial statement is laid before the state legislature. Money bills can be introduced in the state legislature only with his prior recommendation. No demand for a grant can be made except on his recommendation. He can make advances out of the contingency fund of the state to meet any unforeseen expenditure, and it is not consolidated fund of the state. He constitutes a finance commission after every 5 years to review the financial position of the panchayats and the municipalities. These are some of the financial powers which are accorded to the governor. Since it is not consolidated fund but instead contingency fund, the answer to the first question would be A, which is one only. Now let's look into the next practice question. Which of the following differences between the traditional El Nino and the El Nino Modoki are correct? Traditional El Nino is characterized by strong anomalous warming in the eastern equatorial Pacific, whereas the El Nino Modoki is associated with strong anomalous warming in the central tropical Pacific. Traditional El Nino results in diminished hurricanes in the Atlantic, whereas in the El Nino Modoki there are greater number of hurricanes with greater frequency. Which of the statements or differences are right between the traditional El Nino and El Nino Modoki? The answer to this is both. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the El Nino. When we speak about El Ninos, there are two types of El Ninos. One is what is called as traditional El Nino. The other is what is called as El Nino Modoki. What is El Nino Modoki? This is taken from the Japanese meaning, which basically means similar but different. Similar to that of El Nino, but there are slight differences between the traditional El Nino as well as the El Nino Modoki. So El Nino Modoki has some differences with respect to the El Nino, which is why it is called as El Nino Modoki. What are these differences? One, traditional El Nino is characterized by strong anomalous warming, where this warming happens when it comes to the eastern part of the Pacific Ocean, but when it comes to the El Nino Modoki, it is in the central part of the Pacific. So the first statement is right. When it comes to the second statement, yes, traditional El Nino results in diminished hurricanes in the Atlantic, whereas in the El Nino Modoki, there are greater number of hurricanes with far greater frequency. Since both the statements are right, the answer to this would be both. The article further makes a reference to what is called as the long period average. What is this long period average? When it comes to economics, we have something called as the base year. The base year acts as a benchmark. When it comes to the rainfall in geography, what acts as a benchmark is what is called as long period average. As the very name denotes, it is the average of the rainfall which is considered for a long period. It can be 30 years, it can be 50 years, so on and so forth. So what would happen? We have the Indian Meteorological Department which would consider the rainfall for a longer period, and this would act as a benchmark. Currently, we have the Indian Meteorological Department which is considering 87 centimeter rain for the entire country as an average, and the period that it is considering is between 1971 up until 2020. Earlier, we've also had long period averages which were considered between 1961 to 2010, but for now, it is between 1971 to 2020, and the average is about 87 centimeter. Also note that when it comes to the long period average, it is considered for the entire country, but LPAs are also considered by region wise as well. This numbers varies from 61 centimeter in the drier northwest India to about 143 centimeter in the northeastern part of India. So on a whole, we have an average for the entire country, but we also have region specific LPAs as well. But why is the LPA required? That is because once we have an average idea, the Indian Meteorological Department would be able to predict for that particular year, is it going to be normal, near normal, below normal, above normal, deficient or excess. So on the basis of the LPA, you have the Indian Meteorological Department which forecasts the monsoon. So what is normal or near normal? Where the percentage departure of actual rainfall is plus or 10% of LPA, that is between 96 to 104% of LPA. Below normal, when departure of actual rainfall is less than 10% of LPA, that is 90 to 96% of LPA. Above normal, when actual rainfall is 104 to 110% of LPA. Deficient, when departure of actual rainfall is less than 90% of LPA. And excess, when the departure of actual rainfall is more than 110% of the LPA. These are some of the facts that you have to know from the preliminary examination point of view. Now let's look into the next practice question. Consider the following pairs. We have the name of the case on one side, the element of the basic structure on the other side. Is it correctly matched is what we have to find out. S.R. Bommai case speaks about secularism. Kuldeep Nayak case came out with free and fair elections. And Kyoto Holon case discusses about harmony and balance between fundamental rights and directive principles. Which of the above pairs are correctly matched? The answer to this is 1 and 2 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu goes on to say that the S.R. Bommai versus the Union of India, the Supreme Court of India held that secularism is one of the basic features of the Constitution. So we have different landmark judgments given by the Supreme Court of India. Basic structure doctrine was not originally present in the Constitution. This happens to be a judicial innovation. So with each judgment given by the Supreme Court of India, it has come up with an element or an aspect of the Constitution which the Constitution makers had not originally envisaged, which the judges came up innovatively. So basically, when it comes to the basic structure doctrine, the Parliament would not be able to make amendments to the basic structure doctrine. So in the S.R. Bommai case, an aspect of basic structure doctrine happens to be secularism. In Kuldeep Nayak case, free and fair elections was an aspect, and when it comes to Kyoto Holohan case, it was not to do with harmony, but instead it was to do with free and fair elections, sovereign, democratic and republic nature of the Indian polity. As part of the assignment, you have to put on the comment section in which judgment did the Supreme Court come up with the element of basic structure in terms of harmony and balance between fundamental rights and the directive principles. There are other important basic structure elements as well: supremacy of the Constitution, secular character of the Constitution, separation of powers between the legislature, the executive and the judiciary, federal character of the Constitution, unity and integrity of nation, welfare state, judicial review, freedom and dignity of the individual, parliamentary system, rule of law, principle of equality, limited power of parliament to amend the constitution, effective access to justice, principles underlying fundamental rights, powers of the Supreme Court, powers of the High Court. These are some of the aspects of the basic structure doctrine. So you have to put some of the judgments in reference to these elements. Now let's look into the next practice question. With respect to First Buddhist Council, which of the following statements are correct? It was conducted under the patronage of King Kalasoka of Sisuanga dynasty. It was held at Vaishali. The monk who presided over the first council was Mahakasapa. Which of the statements are correct? The answer to this is 3 only. Why have we taken this practice question? Because this article on the Hindu makes a reference to the Buddhist monks. When we speak about the first Buddhist council, it was conducted under the patronage of King Ajatashatru of Haryanka dynasty, and it is not under the patronage of King Kalasoka of Sisuanga dynasty. Where was it held? It was not held at Vaishali, but instead it was held at Sattapani caves in Rajagraha. Since both the statements are wrong, the answer to this would be 3 only. When we look into the Buddhist councils, we have the first Buddhist council, second Buddhist council, third Buddhist council as well as the fourth Buddhist council. The second Buddhist council was held under the patronage of King Kalasoka of Shishuvanga dynasty. The third Buddhist council was under the patronage of Emperor Ashoka of Maurya dynasty, and the fourth Buddhist council was under the patronage of King Kanishka of Kushan dynasty. Please do go through these important facts which can be very important from the preliminary examination point of view. Now let's look into the next practice question. Diclosan considered harmful when exposed to high levels for a long time is most likely present in which of the following? Food preservatives, fruit ripening substances, reused plastic containers, toiletries. This happens to be a previous year question from the year 2021. The answer to this is toiletries. Now let's look into the fact of the day. The fact of the day for today's discussion is chemical weapons. What are these chemical weapons? When we speak about the chemical weapons, it means together or separately as defined by the Chemical Weapons Convention. It includes toxic chemicals and their precursors except where intended for purposes not prohibited under the Chemical Weapons Convention as long as the types and quantities are consistent with such purposes. What do we mean by it? We have the Chemical Weapons Convention. The Chemical Weapon Convention says that you have the toxic chemicals and their precursors, and those chemicals which are barred under the Chemical Weapons Convention should not be used. If they are used as toxic agents that are intended to kill, injure or incapacitate people, such will fall under the chemical weapons. It includes munitions and devices specifically designed to cause death or other harm through the toxic properties of those toxic chemicals which should be released as a result of the employment of such munitions and devices, any equipment specifically designed for use directly in connection with the employment of munitions. So what are these toxic chemicals? Any chemical which through its chemical action on life processes can cause death, temporary incapacitation or permanent harm to humans or animals. This includes all chemicals regardless of their origin or of their method of production and regardless of whether they are produced in facilities, in munitions or elsewhere. What is a precursor? Any chemical reactant which takes part at any stage in the production by whatever method of a toxic chemical. This includes any key component of a binary or a multi-component chemical system. So what are the different types of chemical weapons that we have? When we speak about the chemical weapons, we have different types. It can be a gaseous one, it can also be a liquid one, it can also be the solid as well. When they are employed, because of the toxicity, they will impact the human beings, animals and plants. They inflict damage when inhaled, absorbed through the skin or ingested in food or the drink. What are the different types of chemical weapons? We have the choking agents, we have the blister agents, we have the blood agents, nerve agents, so on and so forth. Some of the examples that we can take off is the Novichok as well as the sarin gas. These are some of the examples of the chemical weapons. As part of the assignment, you can put on the comment section some of the other examples which have recently been in news when it comes to the chemical weapons. So in order to regulate, in order to prevent the transfer of the chemical weapons, what we have is called as the Chemical Weapons Convention. So what is this convention all about? This convention aims to eliminate an entire category of weapons of mass destruction by prohibiting its development, production and acquisition, stockpiling it, retention and transfer, so that all the parties signatories to this particular convention do not actually produce it, do not distribute it, and in case they do have, they completely destroy it. So in order to ensure that there is no chemical weapons, what we have is the Chemical Weapons Convention. In the Chemical Weapons Convention, we require one of the bodies to administer it. That particular institution is called as the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. So this particular body or the organization basically regulates, monitors the development, function, consumption, transfer of some of the toxic chemicals as well as the precursors. So this particular authority is also empowered to issue directions, even close down facilities which violate the convention. And when it comes to India, we have the National Authority Chemical Weapons Convention. It has been established under the Chemical Weapons Convention Act of 2000 for implementing the provisions of the convention on the prohibition of development, production, stockpiling and use of chemical weapons on their destruction. It is an office in the Cabinet Secretariat Government of India. Now, as part of the assignment, you have to put on the comment section which countries have not signed or ratified the convention, because UPSC in the past has asked questions like this. So you have to put on the comment section which are the countries which are not signatories to the Chemical Weapons Convention. It is this that we have to understand in reference to this article. So this is it for today. Thank you for watching. All the best.